Good to go.
All right, here we go. Welcome everyone again. Seeing as I went off a little early before. I'm Winter. Welcome to the Cepheus Protocol Podcast. We've got a nice amount of stuff planned today. We got some devs coming in.
Michael,
I
he'll
think
be
we're
coming in late.
missing one. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Indefinitely.
Yeah. This is my first time hosting one of these. I won't be here every time, but I was asked to join up, help sort things out. We have a document now. Look out. Do you want me to fill 5 minutes for the intro?
No. I can fill the air. So you figure we'll do a quick introductions. I'm here, project director, lead programmer. Chris is here, which is basically the writer, game designer, and concept artist lead. And then we have Michael joining soon, which will be animation and character modeling. And then Efren will be joining potentially, depending on time zone, in the next 30 to 40 minutes, hopefully, for level design and for modeling. So the idea is that we're trying to get more hosts on and rotate people out to get more perspective. So again, if anyone's interested in just kind of coming in and talking and just kind of shooting the shit with us, you're always welcome to. Just send me a message on Discord and we can go from there. And really, we're going to be going through a new itemization of just 5 to 10 minutes for each section. Different developers will talk about what they're doing. If they don't come, then essentially I'll just fill it in because you figure everyone's has their own busy schedule and it's voluntary for them to come on the weekends and just come in and talk to y'all. So regardless, I'm here every week to just fill you guys in on what's going on. So yeah, if you guys go,
I never think you can. Never think you can ever actually say anything wrong. We're all here to, always back you up. Yeah, we're all here to just to have a conversation and, support one another and have a good time.
And one of the biggest things that we're just kind of coming out of this first week is essentially this first week of cleanup. And you figure because of the holidays, I feel like we weren't as efficient as I feel like we could have been. But that just kind of comes with the territory of just all the craziness of just people being all over the country, coming back and X, Y, and Z. But we're going to break it down in terms of everything that we got into this week. I'll be sharing my screen and showing some of Chelsea's new AI, showing some of the setup. And we've kind of taken a top-down perspective of essentially auditing every aspect of the game in terms from a programming standpoint from the project's inception. So right now we're going at the high-level systems of basically say, the RTS Fog of War and the Chelsea AI, because that's so fundamental to gameplay. It's a make it or break it by how her AI operates. So I have my SVNs updated, and I'm going to open up the engine, and I was going to show you guys some of the stuff I've been working on this week. And I will undoubtedly have even more to show next week now that everything's kind of calmed down with all the New Year's hubla. I think that we've stalled long enough, so I'm going to start first because I have the most to talk about. And then from there, that'll stall for the other developers to pop in. Is that cool for you two? They're Winter? Okay, groovy. Cool. Right off the bat, from myself and Derek's standpoint, like I mentioned before, we were working on the Fog of War. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a share screen and pull up our little SDK right here. And if you're on YouTube, you see it. If you're on Discord, you want to join my live stream so you can see my virtual camera on OBS. Essentially, my prerogative has been essentially starting from the lowest core level of player frustration when it comes to her retreating mechanics, when it comes to how she handles damage, how she flees, the frequency of fleeing, making sure that her pod state was a little more solidified so that it wasn't very frustrating, because I feel like at times there were situations where she was a frustration mechanic, and I feel like that poll in the Discord, we did a poll on the Discord, and it was like, while we're during this cleanup period, do you want me to basically add in a optional start where you don't have Chelsea the lieutenants, and essentially it is just the Crow movement from the book on Liberty Island attack, essentially just planning 6 to 8 bombs, 10, and essentially just detonating them across the world, and then that is the inception point that realigns you and course corrects you to start the virus. So you can stop some of them, but you can't stop all of them. So I set up some of the preliminary code, but anyhow, let me show the little bird code first. So one of the things that I was key on fixing, because it felt really, really cheap at times, was Chelsea jumping on helicopters. I feel like that was a knee-jerk reaction to essentially fixing a problem, where in the early game, that was just a little too frustrating, and it was just unforgiving in terms of she could just immediately just delete your helicopter. So what I've been testing with is essentially a system, let me delete Winters, a system where she can throw objects, and I've kind of been using that to prototype, basically having it to where if you have good micro, you can dodge her throwing these objects. Now, the objects aren't going to be rocks. It's just a crude example just to kind of show a proof of concept that I've been working on, that I'm trying to finalize going into Monday, Tuesday. But I feel like this is a lot more forgiving versus driving over a part of the water. Oh, look, Chelsea's on my helicopter. Everyone on board is now dead. And there's no recovery time. You didn't know she was there. It could have been a lieutenant. It could have been Chelsea. You're just fucked. And that just felt really, really annoying. So one thing, again, I was trying to experiment with was something like this, and then having it to where she could mad hop maybe in the second or third stage, in terms of like when you get the shredder rounds, because then at that point it's essentially like a little more hands off and kind of have a natural evolution. So you figure in the beginning she'll do this, and then based off of feedback, based off of what feels right, we'll course correct and adjust as needed. But I want to maybe finesse her AI to where she's not as much as a frustration mechanic, and make it to where like she feels a little more fair, because I feel like it's just the biggest, like it's just a very big noob trap in terms of like how easy you can lose a fleet of helicopters when that happens. And then some people would exploit it and drop her into the Marianas Trench, basically, of just dropping her into the water, and then then she would teleport across the water and then end up in your base. So it was a whole number of things. So again, the rock is not final. I'm going to get with my artists. We're going to make some final assets, like objects that she can throw out of the world and stuff like that. But something along that idea. Now, the next thing I was going to show that I've been working on was essentially how she handles her pod state, because that's very baseline when you interact with her, an easy way to get pissed off in terms of just, low level gameplay. So let me go ahead and let me go and get a sniper. And let me see. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go ahead, and I'm just going to put some circ into the map. And I'm just going to demonstrate this real fast. So we should have enough DPS just copying these guys like 3 times. Then save it and play. And spawn in. They should unload in her. So you'll notice right off of the bat, I focused like a whole day practically to make sure she no longer does the thing where she can move in the pod state. I spent a good amount of time bug fixing and cleaning up our code so that it's impossible for her to move, and that it shuts down her AI. And then essentially what it does, and I'll show you guys, is it starts counting. I'm waiting for Derek to do some AI tweaks so that the health bar comes back when he gets on potentially tonight or on Monday. But you'll see at the bottom it's counting, and that's her health. So the moment it hits 8,000, she'll pop out of the pod, and then she'll blitz out of there at like Mercer speeds. So when it hits 8,000 in a second, let me do a fast forward. If I can type in the fast forward command. See, she'll just yeet out of there and run away now. Instead of just, I think I'm just going to meander around, waste your bullets, maybe destroy your base, maybe teleport through your walls. It's a good day. So essentially, that was one of the things that I wanted to fix when it came to her AI, is making it to where she doesn't loiter when she's been potted and then forcibly retreated. Like, nothing breaks her out of that state no matter what. No damage stress. If you were to somehow unleash an entire salvo of missiles on her, she would still pod and then find a new location and yeet out of there. She's not going to just break and then essentially you're screwed, and she's going to linger around your base. Then you have to like go off and make a whole new base. And that was a huge frustration mechanic that I would see from players on Steam reviews, on Steam forums, on the Discord, where it was just like, this is not fun. In terms of basically like, and like you figure it, because of the cat of mouse approach of gameplay, like it's unforgiving. So like that red diamond is where she designated as her safe harbor. So far enough away from the circ to where she can go there and recollect herself and then figure out what her next move is. And because the idea is that she's not really supposed to be in combat. Now, because I pulled aggro because we were shooting at her recently, she's retreating over there now. She's trying to find a spot. But you can see she was going to that location and then she got potted again. And every time you pod her, she comes out of the pod quicker, and it takes more damage to put her back in the pod state. So eventually it gets to a point where if you're bullying her, you're going to make your life even harder for when it actually comes to the fight. And essentially that's one of the things that I've been doing before I transition over to perfecting and optimizing the code that goes with like the infection system and the zone interaction. Is again, I'm taking this in layers. So this first week was cleaning up her AI and cleaning up the fundamentals of her AI. And then while Derek was doing the fog of war, you can see she's still trying to yeet and get out of here. Because again, she's not supposed to be combative. Not really. Not until you get the shredder rounds. At this point, her whole thing is she's afraid of you. She's not at the power level she's at to kill you actively. But the idea is that like she's going to get to there over time. So we'd unlock her AI in their stages to where like maybe if we were like 30 to 40 minutes in, she'd be a little bit more aggressive to where she'd fight you, but she'd still be kind of hesitant. And then as the time goes on, as she gets stronger, then she'll be a little more confident and she'll push herself and she'll push the player. So then that way it kind of levels out with the engagement of like, you're starting out. Like you don't want to have Chelsea just come into your front door and ram it down and you literally can't kill her. So it's one of those things of like, even then she'll still be delegating to her lieutenants. So one of the other things that I've been working on with Derek is essentially just kind of cleaning. If anyone here is an unrealengine dev or just does a little bit of modding, they'll see what I'm talking about here. But it's always interesting to see behind the curtain. As you can see, like right here is where we set like all of our limits for every map. And then we had a very obtruse, I guess you can say, very dirty fog of war system. So one of the things that we did was we baked that down from a series of volumes and external objects into the world settings and the game state to make it easier to manage and to make it more plug and play. So like you can type in the extent of the fog of war, the tile size, and how often it updates. And then something that we'll look into doing in the future is potentially adding more VFX and making the fog of war more visually interesting and threading it more. But for right now, it's entirely performant with this new setup. And we've just been testing it for crashes and performance issues. So that is in a nutshell what we've done this week in terms of basically just cleaning up Chelsea's AI, trying to patch the bugs with the standard infected AI. Because again, this applies to both. There is a bug right now that I caused where basically flashbanging her causes... what did it do? It was like... The flashbang causes her to not attack people sometimes afterwards. So I have to go in and fix that going in on Monday over the weekend. But that's a simple, trivial fix. Let me see. Is there anything else I can show to demonstrate? I mean...
Actually, I was going to say, do you want to take a few questions for about 5 minutes, and then we'll have a chat to
and then, so if any questions, we're on the YouTube, on Steam, on Discord, hit me up, and I will answer your questions to the best of my ability. Let me go ahead and open the chat so I can actually see it, and then I didn't have the Discord chat open.
Yeah. I've got the Discord. I can pick some questions out from there.
Absolutely.
If you want to keep
and then while I'm filling the air, you'll see that white visualization. That was something that we worked on the blue, sorry. The blue is meant to visualize the box of play. Instead of having like actual objects in the will, we do it all mathematically. So it's more plug and play, because everything that we're doing is slowly but surely veering it towards we can use our tools more efficiently based off of everything we've learned and best practices. But at the same time, we can enable other people to do user-generated content when we get to that point. So it's one thing for us to be able to use our tools. It's another thing for like an external guy that just installs our SDK and just wants to make a map can do it. So that's something that we're also thinking about in terms of like, hey, like we need to make it to where it's so simple that like anyone with no programming expertise can just understand X and Y coordinates of like, oh, X and Y, I'll type that in. I don't have to create a volume. I type the size, the update rate, and then I hit that button, it'll visualize it. Cool. I know, for the extent of my map now, what is going to be encased in the fog of war for optimization reasons. Okay, so let's see if there's any questions. I think Terminal's asking questions.
Yeah. And I think Terminal was asking about a bug, which we can come back to. We have a section at the end for like just...
Okay.
We'll just yap
All
at
right.
the end.
And then for Chris's...
I put aside some time. For just anything. So. I reckon we've still got time. We've got time for maybe one or two questions about...
okay.
We'll
Rezel,
we'll stick anything that Doug
asks, can you make her have the ability to hold my people hostage? Okay, not right now, but that's not a bad idea.
That would be amazing. That would be hilarious. Just seeing some poor little Cirque
soldier.
Well, because
you figure I was actually... Well, I think you two were in a room with me was it last night? Yeah, I was in the room last night with these two, and we were talking about the podcast preemptively, and I was showing them the helicopter thing, because I'd been working on that for a couple hours to perfect her throwing logic. And for whatever reason, I was looking at Prototype. I had Prototype open on YouTube to remind me of Mercer's tool set of abilities and his and how fast he is at times. And we were just talking about Prototype because I love that game. So yeah,
surely not.
So let's see. What else do we have here? Well, because Prototype Mercer runs around and grabs people. And he...
Oh, here I've got a question from Scully here. When Chelsea runs away, is there a trigger for local infected to attack, like to defend, like to reinforce Chelsea while she?
Not currently in the current implementation, but I'm going to write that on my whiteboard for when I go into this next pass, because you figure at this point, my plan is Monday is to stress test what I've already changed in, look for bugs, and then on Monday I would start on the crow movement part of interaction, and then I would start to finalize her interaction with the infection pods and the building and the zones. Once that's online and I have a system to pull from, then I'll look into what you're talking about, where she can instructionally build people in a retreat and send them to protect her back line as she's retreating and whatnot. Because what I was kind of debating over is essentially how far to go down the line, because some of this has to be saved for the AI card, because you figure there's a lot that needs to happen to her AI as a whole and the lieutenant AI, but I'm just trying to change just enough to where we can course correct, fix the major complaints, and then get back to the doctrines. So in my mind, it's like next week is infection spreading, the pod building, the gas tower building, her attacking and defending logic. And then if that doesn't bleed over into the next week, the week after that would be civilians, dynamic civilian groups. And then once that done, once around that time when Derek joins me, he would help me with the civilian evac system. That would be around the last week of this month going into February. And then at that point, we would aim to have an experimental, and we would wipe the current experimental with this one. So you figure that is it in a nutshell in terms of just generally how we're aiming. Let me see. Yeah.
I think that brings us to there's some more questions. Excellent. Which we'll save for the end. I saw.
Yeah, we'll save that more.
Some cool questions too. So are you here, Christopher?
Chris?
We see you.
See me?
Yes. Welcome.
Yeah.
It's your turn. So yeah, everyone. Yep. Christopher, as it was explained to me, Christopher is our lore, our story guru. He's got the big secret book with all the secrets in it.
Super secret.
Everyone loves the big secret book.
Robert mentioned last night that you've been working on some book stuff.
Yeah, so I'm starting a new book. This is the boring phase, I would call it, where like it's more of a pantser, not a plotter. For those of you who don't know, that's where plotters, you write everything out, you plan everything. I don't really like to work that way. Pantsers anymore, you just kind of go with the flow and see where the story goes. But I guess if Robert's the system, I'm plotting something. But my method, right, when I start this, it's kind of odd. I usually just play video games all week and listen to other audiobooks. And as I do that, I kind of like run through what's going to happen in the book and what the scenarios are going to be. So this next book is Natalie's story. Should be a little bit more longer, a little bit more complicated than the last one. And yeah, it should be next week that I actually start to put pen to paper, so to speak.
Yeah, excellent. Do you? I don't know what you can tell us without.
It has zombies in it.
It's got zombies.
All the little nitty gritty details.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you share with us like the general idea for what you're planning to write, or are you keeping it close to the vest?
Close to the vest for now, because I'm still, like I said, at that plotting phase. But it's going to explore Natalie. She's in their first main book for a bit, and it's going to like cover some of that time that you see in that novel. So that novel is more of she jumps around a bit. So this will fill in all those gaps, and it'll give more general insight to what the state of the island is on the civilian perspective. Because the last book was obviously more from the police perspective, so they have a little bit more insight to what's going on. Not much, but I mean they at least work with Cirque at one point. Here it's going to be more of like, because this represents the survivalist, because Treasure Island in this world is has a lot of military veterans due to its the memorial hospital and the military psychologists that are there. So there's a lot of vets that live there, and a lot of them feel kind of disconnected and disenfranchised by the government as a whole. And so like this is like a perfect kind of situation where a lot of that resentment is comes to flourishing. And I always liked in like the early season of The Walking Dead how like some people, Jane was kind of like born for this kind of world, and that's basically what Natalie and her survivalists are like they just seem to work better with all the chaos going around and really don't want Cirque or anybody else's help at this point. Like they're perfectly fine if the world just goes to hell, and that's what I want to explore in this book.
Yeah, and see, absolutely. Like that's something kind of like what I would kind of like thinking of the words. Touch a little bit more on where did the inspiration come from when it came to coming up with the lore for the police faction and the anarchists?
I mean, it comes from a lot of places. I mean, initially it was the actual World War Z book, which I had read a lot prior to this game, and then of course we actually had to sit down watching the movie. And then, of course, just like I said, I was a big fan of the first half of The Walking Dead TV show, and then Fear the Walking Dead, and especially Fear the Walking Dead. I think in the first 3 seasons, it does a better job of exploring this kind of degrade of human society. But like me and Robert, we saw early in development that the biggest issue of just about every zombie genre is that it's always way after the outbreak happens, and it's always just purely from the civilian standpoint. And we want it more as it happens, and then more from the government and military standpoint. And we just started to infuse more civilian perspectives as the story progressed and the development progressed.
I think it's very interesting to really look at it, because both sides, like you're really touching base quite heavily on both sides, and it's rather interesting in my honest opinion. Like Robert, do you have any points to touch on?
I mean, when we're talking about inspiration of just generally like for the books, the game, and whatnot, it was also a huge part from the last ship, and they were billions. Yeah, I was playing They Are Billions one day, and I was like, why the fuck isn't there a modern version of this? And then I went to Chris and I was like, we have to do this
first
right now.
three.
That was like 2016,
it's like the first
2017, I think it was.
Show more. Yeah, I mean, it's like you basically forced me to watch that show. I did not like the first.
It was cheesy. It was what it was. It took it.
I mean, you have like Russians flying a Pavlo, a Jolly Green Giant as an attack.
Yeah,
it's like what
budget
is this?
is a bitch.
I mean, you can get a CG Hind.
Yeah,
it's not that hard. But once you get through that initial hurdle, I think the show gets really good, and especially when they dive more into how the virus is affecting the United States.
Yes,
I think, was that
when they returned back from the cure in the first season.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so like I ended up watching that whole series and ended up kind of becoming obsessed with it. I got to actually go through it again.
Probably. I
saw it somewhere.
I have the box set. Yeah. But literally, it's one of those things where it's like there's so many things that inspire the game when it comes down to it, and I feel like from a story standpoint, Chris does an excellent job of just kind of encapsulating the world, the characters, and the motivations, and like hinting at little things that are coming down the pipe. Because again, the books are our framework, our Bible for the campaign. So the idea is that like everything he's writing right now is a lore book for like the rules, the regulations, like the general plot line that we're following. And then obviously there will be some changes because when you go from any medium to another, there's always going to be things that just don't translate well. And him and I talk about that pretty frequently. Where it's like that works in a book, that works in a movie, but doesn't work it's not conveyed as easily in a game kind of deal, or like you get to spend more time on certain things. So it's one of those things where it's like there are certain moments in that I personally can't wait to get to when it comes to the book.
Yeah, me and Robert are like really big lore nuts for like Star Wars, Star Trek, Halo, all of that kind of stuff. So we wanted to add lore, more than just what you see is what you play. We wanted to go far back and then eventually further ahead.
I'm a huge.
And essentially how where there's no gaps. That was the biggest thing is
I grew up on like Halo, and then going back and reading the books and everything else was just kind of like really fun. So because it gave me another perspective to the games you had played. So it's one of those things where like I wanted Chris to do that when it came to the books to people that wanted to know more. But then also another way for people to be like, hey, I'm interested in the story. It helps fund the game's development, kind of deal. And that way it kind of worked out for everyone, where it was just kind of like, hey, like check out this optional like side content lore stuff. And then at the same time, it helps. I mean, it pays for the bills for like, because we're an entirely self-funded team. So it was another cool way of being like, hey, like this is the universe we're building for the game you're playing in Pandemic. So you can know more context of who is Winters, who is Chelsea, and X, Y, and Z. Now there's a lot of characters that we haven't introduced, like Wu, like Kira, like Spears, and a bunch of other people. So it's like those are the people I can't wait to kind of like put forward, fun for so that's gonna be fun. But anyhow, back to you two.
Yeah, I'm personally very excited for the campaign.
I'm going to spend a good period of time in just incubation with Chris, because you figure our plan is that after we implement co-op, the whole team's like going on a hiatus for probably a couple weeks to like detox for like 4 to 5 years to just grind nonstop, like 8-hour, 12-hour days. And then when we get to that point, we're going to take a break, spend a good month of just research, maybe go to San Francisco, me and Chris are definitely going to go to San Francisco and spend like a couple of days just walking around, taking pictures, talking about the story. So that's going to be fun. I can't wait till we get to that point. I'm literally very eager to get to that point of the story.
I think we have. We can touch on one more topic and then we'll take questions for Chris.
Yeah. I think something that I know I'm personally interested in is, where did the inspiration for Cirque come from? Like, where did the lore for Cirque really take hold?
I mean, that's really no real secret. It's just, I just love military stuff. I mean, we talked about that last week, how, both me and Robert and many people on our team are like really into military. And so, being that we wanted to come from the military perspective, originally I think we just had like it was literally just a CDC.
It was a CDC
in like that first week. Yeah, then we're like, oh, we're gonna probably get sued if we use the CDC, and then Robert suggested we should just create our own organization, and I mean, for me personally, when it comes to Cirque, I grew up as a big G.I. Joe nut, and so I kind of approached all of the characters from a G.I. Joe perspective, and how I wanted them to be more unique, more interesting, and then a draw for more of an international type of focus. Some of those team members are more down the line. Even Winters was originally two characters instead of just one.
It used to be a guy and a girl that you could pick in the beginning. Yeah. And then essentially, I'll show it on my screen. So if you look at my...
Yeah, that's why it's Adrian Winters, because Adrian is...
so this was the original concept. Because of budget, we were like, okay, let's just focus on the girl. And then in the future, we could potentially make it to where you could flip-flop. But the idea was, this is one of the very earliest concepts that we made, where it was just like Adrian and both Winters, basically, as like a little promo piece that we made. Anyway, back to you, Chris.
And then Greg is like pretty much all of our main characters come from Band of Brothers. Winter is Captain Winters on Band of Brothers. Spears is Major Spears in Band of Brothers. So like it's like a lot of Lost and Band of Brothers secrets are peppered throughout the numbers.
Remember we hit the numbers?
Yeah, the numbers.
Yeah, we took it out early build. But we gotta hide those numbers somewhere else in the game again, because that was fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to you two, because we got to move on to the next. Can I cover Efren's work? Because I already told him to come on to the room to talk, but he hasn't done his thing.
Yeah, after questions, we'll just head back to you.
Efren, accept my invite. Anyway, go.
Lore questions. Anybody got any lore questions? Obviously, not everything will be able to be answered if it's spoilery, but if anybody has any questions for like anything you're curious about, lore
gameplay wise,
something about
he could pretty much answer anything when it comes to the gameplay and what's coming down the pipe.
Not
like the super deep systems, but you know enough. Yeah,
anything about why things are the way they are.
Terminal. There's 3 people question writing. Let me see if anything on YouTube.
Yeah,
nothing yet. It's more so just people talking.
I see. People are typing,
so we're good.
I'll let people finish these messages. It's all. I've got that set aside. Drive and kill in Discord.
Excuse me.
We'll ask that one at the end.
Oh, that's for you, Chris.
Here we go. Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, always read it out.
Yeah. Terminal has asked, is the virus an alien thing that has an unintentional effect on Chelsea and the infection is an accident, or is it a more of a modified sort of bioweapon type deal where it's been tweaked and created to change the environment and the Earth? Is it an alien bioweapon, or is it just like, whoops, alien virus?
It as whether or not it's actually created by aliens, like the engineers or something, that's a maybe. It's not fully explored, but it is definitely and comes from space. It's in fact, it's the first chapter of the main Cepheus Protocol book. It's discovered in Antarctica, where actually a lot of meteorites are found in real life, including the one that they think had actual biological life on it, at least fossilized. And only this one was alive and well. And it was discovered by Chinese researchers in the late 90s, and eventually the CCP came in. It was really more of a rogue general as part of like their bioweapon program, and he ended up weaponizing it, and he used it on some civilian populations, and that was like more of just it makes people gross, kills them. But as they work more into the modern time frame, it became more of the virus that we think of. And so the U.S. went and got the virus from a Chinese research base, and but then the ship on its way back to the U.S. got caught up in a storm, and a bunch of bad stuff happens. The Navy SEALs on board get affected, and it's when the virus reaches the U.S. shores. Chelsea, she being a nurse, she was like walking on the beach. She goes to she finds one of the SEALs and tries to help him, and unknowing that she gets infected, but instead of like killing her, there was like a certain like mutation within her, like 1 in a billion chance that ultimately awakens the true potential of the virus. And that's why she's essentially patient zero.
Fantastic. I think we'll move on now. For our next presentation, we've got Ephraim here. Sorry, is it Ephraim or Ephraim? I don't.
It's Ephraim.
Yeah. You said you were going to take over this section.
Do you want to talk about what you're working on this week, Ephraim? Okay, moving on. So essentially, I will share my screen.
Shit, sorry, I was muted.
No, wait, here he is. So for everyone, Ephraim is, as it was explained to me, level design, modeling, and a lot of sort of art direction and design stuff. All right. So more the actual meat and bones of putting things
Ephraim,
together.
All you.
Is Ephraim.
Yeah. Well, so pretty much all I've been working on is, the new models for the new gear we got coming out. Just working out some kinks with the texture baking and Blender. I mean, it's pretty much done. Now I just have to push it through the textures. And then getting started on an Alcatraz, which is going to be a lot of fun. I took a trip and a tour there last December, I believe. Took a bunch of pictures, got to go inside the prison, get a good look at the layout. I know we're probably going to have a different take on it maybe, but I'm really looking forward to working on that because it's going to be like a player hub, kind of like Dark Tide or what was that other one? Vermintide,
that kind of stuff.
For players to run around in. Yeah. So that's going to be an interesting project. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's all I have on deck, and really hoping to get into that real soon.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm not sure whether to touch on your plans for Alcatraz or some model stuff, but let's go with some model stuff. You've been working on? Was the what's this? The radio antenna?
Dimitri, I was going to talk about that. He's been working on the grenades, and he was having some texture baking issues. Plus, his week was chaotic because of New Year's, so he wasn't able to finish it. But regardless, that's what he's been focusing on. So, Ephraim, do you want to talk about what else you want to mention for that?
Nothing more other than just getting a hang of doing certain things in Blender that I knew how to do in Maya and Max pretty well, but Blender's a lot different, so it's just getting used to the way it reacts to the way I'm doing things and learning how to use the tools, which aren't as intuitive as Maya's and Max's, but got over that hurdle, so it should be easy going from here on until I hit something else that I haven't done in Blender. So yeah, there's always that challenge of when you're switching software. It's kind of like learning a similar language, but quite different. It's like the difference between Portuguese and Spanish, I guess.
That makes sense.
Do you want to?
I mean,
that's fair.
Sorry. do you want to take us through not the entirety, but like just an idea of the steps and the processes you go through when you're working on something like this?
Oh, usually I'll bang out like a simple block out, pass it on to Dave and Mike, have them approve it, and then I'll go into it with more detail and send it back to them, see, whether it needs improvement in some areas or more detail in other areas. So there's always the issue of poly count, which these days isn't such a huge issue with Unreal because we could always run it through Nanite, but I always try to keep things fairly optimized when I do work. And then after that, it's just UV mapping, texturing, which is probably the easiest part for me as far as the modeling process goes. The most pain in the ass part, of course, has been the normals. And there's certain rules you have to follow, especially in Blender, in order to get the desired effect to make them look good. And there's a lot of things that I myself have forgotten because I haven't done this in like 6-9 months. So it's like when you spend a lot of time on one aspect of the project and you come back to like if I do a whole year of just pure level design and then go back to modeling, like, oh, so how did I do this again the last time? Yes. When you're worried, that's what happens.
Sense.
It's the fresher it is in the back of your mind.
He got really far away all of a sudden.
Terribly sorry, Efren. Your mic
You went far away.
has died on us a little bit.
There.
I think he went off the Narnia. So,
I'm
gonna message
him. Is he
him.
still going? Can he hear us?
We can't hear you anymore.
Well,
I'm sure what he's saying is really interesting.
I messaged him, so he's fixing it. But
okay, cool.
So while Efren fixes up his mic a little bit, I would like to
Michael's in.
Justin
Okay.
Michael in.
We can have Michael go over his animation thing.
I'm driving, so I don't know how well my audio sounds.
There's no issue.
Like,
let me wrap up
everyone.
the modeling section, and then we can move on to animation for you. So for the modeling standpoint, this is Dimitri's baby right here, which was one of the last things that was on his modeling list for the Cirque Doctrines. And essentially, it is the ability for the radio man to put down relays. These relays allow up to 3 per radio man to essentially call in airstrikes in areas where you normally would not have a radio man. Right now, they're not going to be allowed to be built on rooftops yet. When we add the ability for AI to climb in the AI card, then that's something that we will revisit and we will remove build restrictions. As it stands right now, I don't want to add a mechanic into the game that is just going to break it. So essentially, you can build these anywhere on the ground, and you can just call in your airstrikes, and this will work perfectly with the synergy of the new airstrikes that are coming down the pipe. Now, as of Monday, Dimitri is going to be starting on the airstrikes, and I will be showing those as we progress on a week-by-week basis. We have not determined which airstrike he's going to start on first after he finishes up auditing the old ones. Now, we have about 4 or 5 airstrikes that are already done that are brand new, like the White Phosphorus, the AC-130 run, the Thunderbolt bombing run and the Thunderbolt gun run. And then there was another one that's escaping me right now. I'll have to find those and I'll bring it up on stream in a second just in case people have some context of what I'm talking about. Let me go ahead and find that really quickly. But the idea is that he'll be working on those. I'll show the revamped, audited ones next time we meet, next Saturday, for the ones that you guys saw previously that have just been updated to the latest engine standards. And then ideally, there'll be a couple of new ones to show, because again, he's allocated for about 14 days, for give or take, to just finish all of the new airstrikes. A new Bunker Buster one for killing Greg. A new precision airstrike for like a little radial one. He's working on a Moab, the mother of all bombs. He's working on, that's going to be an endgame airstrike. We briefly discussed that last week. And then he's working on a huge napalm one And those two are the end tier, like end game. You just destroy zones, kills all the civilians and buildings, kills all the infected. You deal with the ramifications of your actions. Of like, congratulations, everyone on the map that saw this now hates your guts if you didn't properly evacuate and clear out those zones. So it's going to be interesting, the synergy between that gameplay, because it's one of those things where, like, okay, let's say you want to firebomb an area because you've deemed it lost. You could tell everyone in that zone that's still alive to exodus over a bridge, and then when enough people have left or your defenses have started to fall, you could start just dropping bombs for whoever's still there, blow the bridge before you start killing everything in that zone, and that information would not travel across. The people in your green zones won't know all of the atrocities that you did in your yellow and red zones that are on the other side of the bridge. So it's going to be one of those things where it's going to be very interesting, the gameplay opportunities this is going to present. And I'm really excited for that one, because that's going to be fun. You just hear all the stories people do. I'm making a goddamn war crime simulator, I swear to God.
I mean...
Sometimes I'm just hearing the stuff I'm saying, and I'm just Jesus Christ. The Geneva Convention hates me.
The civilians can hate... The civilians can hate us for all they want, but we have a Moab, they don't.
I suppose so.
It's just like, you can hate me, but I can erase you from existence. There wouldn't even be a speck of you left.
I've created monsters. But anyhow, let me show these, and then we can get on to Michael, because I know he's driving right now. So I'll share my screen. This is one of the new airstrikes that we've kind of had in our little arsenal for the last, I think, almost a year at this point. But we didn't want to jump the line and implement it before we got the Cirque doctrines. This is basically the Thunderbolt bombing run. And essentially, this is being audited and cleaned up with the latest versions of Niagara to make sure it works and that nothing has changed to make it not as performant anymore. Then you have the White Phosphorus. We are changing some of the effects for implementation. So that way the damage is a little more accurate to each individual fire bloom. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get with Dimitri about improving the quality of the fire, so going into next week. Then the last one is the gun run Thunderbolt. Everything here is randomized. So just because you saw like those rounds hit the same location here this one time, next time it's going to be variation of like they're going to all each crater, every impact point is going to be distinctly different. So you can't always like guesstimate if it's going to be accurate, because we wanted to kind of get that Company of Heroes approach where it was like there's some variation to the airstrike, because Company of Heroes is a huge inspiration for just generally how we do our airstrikes and how we just go about gameplay. So these are some of the things that he's cleaning up as it stands right now. Probably take Monday, Tuesday just to audit everything, make sure all the warnings or errors are gone. If there are some from when we made it in 5.3 and now we're in 5.5. And then at that point, he'll start on the new ones. I will bring up that list briefly so you guys have some context. And then we are going to move on to Michael. So give me one moment. Let me pull up our roadmap image, and I will show that for prosperity's sake, just so people understand what I'm talking about. And then, did you guys want to go over the poll results as well at the end? And what one? We can do it at the end, and then that way we can give some context of our standpoint on what won and what lost. So that way people understand like what is going into each consideration and the choices that we make. Because I feel like once we're able to kind of verbalize and explain why we make the choices that we make and why some things are the way they are, then people will have a little more context to understand, like, okay, I see where they're coming from. Give me one moment.
Real quick, before you go to me, I'm like 2 exits away, like maybe like 8 minutes.
I can stall. We'll move on to someone else and move on to that. It's okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what we'll do is, because we're running, we're almost through the hour, but we are going to, we've got one more section, and then I don't think anyone's in a hurry. I think we're all going to hang out for a while. It's just, so if anybody has something to do, they can be like, yep. made it.
So just really quickly, let me go through this.
So-
It'll stall a little more time, and then we can get to whatever you have planned for next. So again, this is the logistics section of the Cirque Doctrine tree that we have planned. And the idea is that we're going to be adding in the GPU 43-B. And I forget the napalm one that Dimitri picked. You have the chargers for the Thunderbolt run, so it's not just call in one and you're done. So if you see a number, those are chargers. And the idea is logistics is going to be like the bombing run, the white phosphorus, the updated supply crate we showed off previously, an upgraded Hellfire volley, the AC-130 dragon gun ship, the gas attack, and then the 2 super airstrikes where you'll have to build a structure that is the coordination, the point. Think of it as like in Command and Conquer 0 Hour. It was like your ion particle beam building structure that facilitates and does the management and the operation for when you can call that in. And if that is destroyed, it's like your T4, Tier 3 structure for like, okay, like it's destroyed, now you can use it, cooldown up, now you can use it. And that's the general idea we're taking it in, because we're always thinking about long-term balance. You know, when we get to the point of like trying to test more complicated aspects of gameplay, like doing the co-op, like doing the versus if we get to that point of like if people want it kind of deal. So those are all things that we're thinking about in terms of like we don't want to make it to where it's so impossible to balance Cirque. GG, you're done. Get out of here, kid. So that's something that we are looking at. Oh, and I wanted to touch on one more thing. So I mentioned this briefly last week, and I wanted to hit on this a little bit more. And that, as it stands right now in our current build of Unreal Engine 5.5.1, there is a bug related to HLOD and navigation building that makes it to where I could not prototype on the final map that has Presidio, the new Treasure Island, and the other stuff gone, and the power plant island. So I'm now prototyping and building the new revamped pandemic mode on the older San Francisco open world map. When Epic fixes that, that's when I'll transition over, and then we'll push for trying to basically get it out to you guys to being able to test the basically downtown San Francisco, like what you can see in that huge picture there of this nether realm right here. So again, I'm just waiting for Epic to get back to us on a bug fix, and so are a lot of Unreal Engine devs, because you figure if you go to the release forums for 5.5, everyone's just moaning and complaining about how they broke a lot of fundamental aspects of like production for open world games. So it's one of those things where like once they fix that, then I'm going to convert everything over. So just keep in mind, worst case scenario, we get to February, the first week, second week of February, and you'll be playing on the old map, worst case scenario. If they don't fix it, if I don't certify it's fixed, then it'll be that. But the moment they do fix it and we get that approval or that acknowledgement from them, then it will be full. We'll convert everything over and do what needs to be done to get that area situated. Because that HLOD is essentially what makes the map performant. Just top-down perspective of how to explain this is if you ever played Fallout 4, you ever notice that you have like these buildings that turn into like mush, like their textures and everything gets simplified. And what it does is it takes your objects and it down converts them like hundreds, thousands of objects into one big object. And then it bakes their textures down to a 1K, 512K sheet. And then so the idea is it dynamically optimizes and clusters things together that are far away from your camera. So your processor doesn't have to update and maintain that street sign on another island that you're not even on. That object gets down converted, its collision is retained, and it's just part of that merged, like low poly structure. And then when you go there, then it transitions from that combination, that merge of like thousands of objects back, the individual one object to like thousands of objects kind of deal. Very, very, very cool technology that they have in game design. But anyhow, if Michael's not there yet, what did you want to segue to?
I think, well, we had planned for 3 sections and
yes.
the chill. We've done the 3 sections, so we're now sort of coming up on the end of the planned time. So anything past it,
okay. So what we'll do,
whatever you want to do,
just because it's not that much time, is let's see. Is there anything else that I can show? Let me check something.
See, something I am curious about is you said what was it, lone ship or something like that?
Last ship.
The last ship.
The last ship, that's it. What the hell is that all about? I've never actually
the basic synopsis is basically there's a destroyer, I think it is, and it gets sent off to the the cruiser gets sent off to the Arctic to do some kind of like training, but it's really just a cover for like a virus that's spreading across the world. And essentially they're looking for in the Arctic permafrost for a primordial sample that has like a very like it's like a very like younger version of the virus, thousands of years old, young, whatever. So the idea is that they want to get that sample to help reverse engineer, because this doctor that's on the ship thinks that if they have that, that's the cure. That's the way of curing the infection that's like taking over the whole planet. It's not like a zombie infection. It's more of like a traditional like pandemic. Everyone's dying. Their blood's coming out of their eyes, or like that kind of stuff. Where it's like it just makes you lethargic and kills you slowly. And it spreads by contact and coughing and all that stuff. So that was a fun show to watch, just to kind of get some ideas and just kind of like, it's just a really fun show to watch. It's very cheesy at times, but it just entertaining. It's like the Resident Evil movies, if you've ever seen those. Well, everyone knows they're not very good, but they're a guilty pleasure. You know what I mean? I think we all sat in a room and watched the recent Umbrella one, the Raccoon City.
Oh.
It was bad, but it was good because it was the most faithful adaptation I've ever seen of a video game.
Speaking of Resident Evil, though, have you seen Death Island?
They had Alcatraz in it, and I was like, huh.
Yeah. I genuinely love Death Island. That was a brilliant movie.
I was indifferent about it. I kind of liked I don't know. Like, it was okay. Like, I didn't like it. I didn't hate it. It was in the middle, because you figure like I like more of the early Leon movies. I don't know. I'm a fanboy for Leon.
Well, Leon is probably one of the better.
Yeah, he is. Jill, Leon, Claire, Chris, the boulder, the one that that's the punch things, like the punch things. Yeah, the meme. Was it Resident Evil 5 when he would punch boulders to fight Wesker?
Yeah.
That was
Resident
insane.
Evil 5, yep. To punch the bolt. Every
time I play Resident Evil 5, which would lag out, remember? Because their ping compensation was bad. 6 was fine because their lag and their servers were better, or like their compensation, whatever, for like you're in Australia, I'm in the United States. It was actually maintainable. We just stopped playing for some reason.
I actually, you know what? That reminds me. I might reinstall.
Well, that and me and Christina do a new Total War campaign, because I was going to take Africa, and then he was going to take Europe. I go south, he goes north. 10 out of 10.
Good lads. So just for everyone else, now that we've reached the sort of end of our planned segments, if you have questions, this is now more the sort of forum section, right?
Yeah.
If anyone has anything to ask, any questions, any curious, we're all just hanging out now. The podcast.
We're waiting for Michael, but Michael,
If you want to, Michael's going to come and chat more, but this is sort of now we've reached the end of the shut up and listen part. This is now the interact.
If anyone wants to raise their hand, they can't talk in the voice chat. I know people are like really shy. They used to do it a lot, and then nobody does it anymore. And it makes me a sad
scared
cat.
Of you.
So, if you guys want to raise your hands, feel free.
Drive and Kill asked a question a couple of times. So, hold on, he was up here. If you wanna go for that, I said
What was the question?
I said I'd bring it up at the end. I'll read it out. Are there plans for including normal civilian buildings more into gameplay, such as infected masses growing on the buildings that need to be burnt out with?
We tried that previously, and we had some issues with the scale of the world. There was like a good week 2 weeks when we had like infection growth on the buildings. That's something that I'm talking of Dimitri for this month right now to see if we were to reintroduce it, what would it look like, and how do we keep it performant in the confines of the engine? Because he is very keen on tying that into PCG, and PCG is a tool that essentially makes it to. Okay, I just saw it at the artwork terminal put in the chat, but essentially, it's very keen on PCG, and PCG is a new tool in 5.4 roughly that essentially allows you to define rules, and then it grows like grass dynamically. So the idea is that like you can define like where it can go, where it can't go, what are the connecting pieces, and then that way an artist doesn't have to manually go through the world and essentially like populate it. It would just be like, oh, it spreads on this building like this. It spreads on the streets like this. And that would be like the passive growth that would be attached to buildings. That if you destroy the growth on the building, it would deteriorate or like reduce the growth in the radial area. It is something that I have on my bucket list to do regardless before we leave early access. It's just I have to figure out the best way of implementing it tech-wise so it's performant. But yes, that is something that I'm thinking about. That is something I'm going to be discussing with Dimitri going into the end of January. If we can fit it in during this audit, this cleanup period of the core pandemic mode, I will. If not, it'll be pushed to the AI card. And then at that point, we'll evaluate it then and figure out if we have more time dedicated to it. Because like what Commander Shepard just posted is ultimately the goal of having it to where you have some kind of like contagion, like zones where like you can clearly tell what area is affected and what areas aren't. Like a good example is the Upside Down world from like Stranger Things. And we constantly reference that in our art and like our deco, where we have like mood boards that just kind of show like what the world looks like at certain times of the day and what it looks like as the virus progresses on a day-by-day basis. And it's one of those things where it's like we're just waiting until we have the time to just focus in on that in its own and be able to take it as far as we can. So yes, it's something that we're conscious of and we're looking into implementing in the future. There was another question on YouTube from someone. Hold on. He's been like trying to get my attention forever.
I've never watched.
I'll pray for your soul.
Oh my god. Yeah.
I've never seen it.
I'm going to cry.
I've always.
You don't have a kid.
The Mohave will have environmental damage, the IMOX. The whole premise of it is that when you drop that baby, it's going to run a radio check and it's going to kill everyone in its radius from the epicenter. So the idea is it's going to kill people in buildings that you haven't evacuated. It's going to kill people on the streets. Like anything in that circle is just you point it in a direction and it goes bye-bye. It's gone. You forget about it. Everything in that zone doesn't exist. Kind of deal. So it's going to be very OP. But it's going to be its ups and downs where it's like if you do it, like I mentioned earlier, there could be repercussions that last the whole game. And one of the things that I'm going to be keen on us doing is going into the second month of February. Because again, we allocated three months, January, February, March. At the end of January, going to early February, we'll have pandemic mode playable. And then at that point, we're going to go back and we're going to use the rest of February and just tighten the bolts. Change a couple of things here and there, see what else we can kind of push based off what people have said in podcasts. Like I know that one of the major complaints is like the dynamic civilian groups being kind of futile, but just window dressing. It's kind of a gimmick. So if we have the time, I'll look at previous podcasts and see what we can do about making some minor changes to how intelligent they are, how they build units, how they strategize. And then one of the other things that I wanted to look into was having it where you can give them orders. Or like, so that way if you're allied with someone, you can tell them to do stuff. Because right now you can recruit out of them. But that's something that I want to look into. And me and Derek are going to go back and forth. And we're going to basically see if we can fit that in there. Otherwise, if we can't get that fit in and we run out of time going into February, March, then we will push that into 1.4 for the factions. Because there's a suite of changes that need to happen to the AI in terms of the dynamic civilian groups and the we're gonna call them sub-factions. We'll call them sub-factions, just like Pierce and Natalie, to make sure they have enough layers, enough detail to them, so that they fire on all calibers and they're not just reskinned civilians. That's crap. So it's one of those things where it's like previously, they were just reskin civilians. They were there for just role play. They didn't really kind of do anything. So that's why, again, we removed them after we put them in because we were just like, this doesn't work right. Like, this is crap. Like, let's put something in there. Let's make sure it gets the right attention to detail and the time of day, kind of deal. Let's not bite off more than we can chew. So again, it's one of those things that I want to kind of hit upon in sequential order and not jump the line. But yeah, I'm thinking of that. Let's see. Any other questions, boys?
Not that I can see. Hang on, let me double check.
I was going to say, I there's sometimes, like, if a question pops up in the chat and you've given an answer before, I don't know whether to ask it again or just answer.
You can just be like, hey, we just answered that already. Or just go back to the VOD.
Oh, no, it was more like it was a question that has been answered. Not in this podcast, but a while ago.
That's fine. I don't really have a problem repeating myself. What were we going to say, Devlog?
So Sergeant Ghost wants to know if there's going to be a Harrier controllable unit type.
If I get my way, and we can fit it in, then yes. I have to kind of see just the timeline because I don't want a repeat of 2024. Where basically, like, I don't want to repeat.
I was going to say,
there are some really great community ideas. Yeah. There are things that I want to add in right now, but I can't. Like, you figure, ultimately, there's going to get to a point this year where after the game is more polished and bugless, I'm going to have to stop taking community suggestions and just finish what we initially intended to do. They finish the game, get it out of early access, and then we'll pick up community suggestions and ideas again. Because it's one of those things where it's like we get so many good ideas that it's like civilian evacuation wasn't a thing until I think Terminal and a bunch of other people would not let up for years. They were like, we really want this. We need to add it. It would add so much. And I was just like, no. Like, we have so much going on. And I caved and I tried it and it was great. It was fun. So it was one of those things where it's like I didn't initially consider it in its original, like, set piece, whatever. But it was one of those things where I was like, okay, like, I think it's really fun to take people's considerations in. But, like, so we keep on this schedule, it's going to get to a point where it's locked in. So, like, the one thing that I'll say that I'll budge on is I know that thread that Terminal runs for the alternate, like, items that, like, populate your bases and design it. So, like, you figure that's the one thing that I'm going to budge on is the building props and having... Because the thing is that I don't want to implement what Terminal's thread was until they have purpose. So, I like some of the ideas that she had brought forward, But it's like, we're adding a radio tower. Okay, let's give it a purpose in gameplay. Let's have it like actually work as like amplifying airstrikes and give you even larger radius that the engineer can build. We're adding barricades and like sandbag traps and all that stuff. Let's make it to where it stops the juggernaut. They have to stop and destroy it, or they have to like leapfrog over it, or if they determine that in their AI it'd be faster, go over a building. Because it's layers is what I feel like. To where it's like we need to get what we have done, get out of this little hole, in Q1, and then going into Q2, get the Circuit Doctrine stuff. Then at that point, get that solidified, and then look at our AI, and then around the AI card is I feel like the best time to implement Terminal's things, because it's so many items to add to the game that I want to go back to our AI and retroactively improve the director around the AI card, so then that way, and we talked about this briefly, is that the AI has a prioritization issue where, like, if they start at one point and they go to another, sometimes they don't perfectly understand what is the absolute minimum they need to do to get from A to Z and not attack all this frivolous crap. Sometimes they do really great, sometimes they do really bad. So it would be some kind of capsule, some kind of scanning system that groups infected together and then keeps them together, and then can separate and subdivide into attack parties. And that's something that I want to push in an AI card. And that system would prioritize, I don't care that little Timmy's over there shooting at you and he's a civilian group. Stay in your group. You have a target, go for your target. Unless that person somehow supersedes the threat that you've already been assigned to, like you're going on an attack mission, and then a big enough party attacks you, then fine. Handle that party. then go back to what you originally set out to do. If you get ambushed on the way to like a Cirque base, or you ambush them on the way to a dynamic civilian group that you're protecting. So that's something I want to do, and have it to where that capsule, that system, can scan ahead based off of the pathfinding that it does, and assign priorities based off of an algorithm mathematically of like these two sandbags need to be destroyed, these two walls need to be destroyed, these three Hescos need to be destroyed, whatever, and that would make enough to keep the column going and not lose momentum and not lose the integrity of basically what they set out to do, which is to fight the civilians. So, because right now it's like if you ever notice the infected, they aren't strategic enough to the level that I'd like. In terms of like, if they actually, like if it was a player playing as the infected, I feel like you'd get wrecked. In terms of basically like, if you think about all the tool set that the infected have, in terms of Leviathans, in terms of the Juggernauts, the Spitters, the blow-up guys, the standard infected, the lieutenants, Chelsea, if they were used in a more intelligent manner that a human can think and can understand, they'd be a lot more formidable. So it's one of those things where like spending a good amount of time ratcheting up their AI would fix that. And at the same time, it would push like having those ambient objects that Terminal's been pushing for, and a couple other cats have been pushing for in the thread on Discord, to basically have it where they understand what they need to do when you set them out on a directive. So yeah, that's one of the foundational systems that we're going to focus on after certain doctrines, because it'd be that AI for the lieutenants, AI for the normal, then it'd be the operator, then it's co-op. Anyhow, Michael's back, so Michael, you have the floor, and then I'm going to bring up Chelsea. Let me bring up her.
Alrighty. So on the animation tab, basically what I'm doing is going back, reload animations are going to be coming in. So they're no longer going to be swatting at the air. They'll actually be moving the magazine and changing out the mag. So that's coming down the pipeline. And then the polish in terms of that would be like weird oddities where the left hand is either doing some weird jiggle. If there's any more of the chest jiggle, that's going to be eliminated. That's getting completely destroyed. The grenade throw is getting fixed. The engineer's repair. I don't know if you guys have noticed that there's no repair tool in this hand. So that's going to be fixed as well. So we're going to be going down the line and kind of sprucing all of that stuff up in terms of polish. And then additionally with that, we're going to look at getting the SMAW correctly done. Because right now it's just kind of, it's passable, but it definitely could be better. Going to look at doing better aim nodes for the people in the helicopters are sitting on the railing. That I feel like could be better because right now it's using an old system. I guess the terminology, it's using a blend space. It just needs to use an aim node. I'm going to tear that out. I just have to be careful about tearing it out. Don't want to break anything. And then alongside with that, I was going to look into better not necessarily like, because we played around with motion matching, but I was going to look into local motion because that's not as complicated, or I would say like performance. It's more performant than motion matching, but it would be a lot more fluid movement. And I was wanting to implement that into the base cert and also into the operator. Also, it is, motion matcher is experimental, and introducing that right now would be catastrophic because what we played with was already very complicated. Well, like Robert had to go rewrite like a whole system to get it to work. So it's one of those things in baby steps. I would say like maybe the end of this year, it might be in a better place to kind of maybe play around with it on the operator only. I don't know. It's really because it doesn't support replication. And for whatever reason, even if it's a single player game, having it work on AI, it seems to bug out just a little bit.
They have a documentation problem.
They might have it fixed up. It's a documentation problem for the AI, but for the player, it works beautifully. Like, no complaint. It's very, very realistic. And so hopefully the plan is we can kind of get that onto the operator for when you're actually controlling the operator. In terms of RTS mode, we'll have to come back to that. But that's something that I'm constantly looking at to see if they've kind of improved it and enhanced it a little bit. I'm also going to deviate off of the animation path in terms of the modeling side. So in terms of weapons, we're not adding anymore as of right now. But we are going to be taking out the placeholder. So MP7 is still old. That's getting put in with the actual mesh in there. The remake of MP7, that one's been in there since probably alpha. That one's getting taken out back and discarded. And then the M60. The M60 was a placeholder for the M240. And that M240 has been done. I just haven't had time to texture it. So that one is going to be coming in. I would say it would probably Tuesday it will be in. And then anything else with that? Oh, and the civilians. A lot of civilians have some interesting firearms, especially the factions. I've been doing a lot of research on that. So you're going to see a change in terms of what the civilians are going to be running around with. It's going to be a lot more of 9mm. What?
They don't know. I haven't mentioned it at all.
Yeah, that's what. Oh, okay. So yeah, we were looking into kind of making it more realistic in terms of the weaponry that the civilians have and the sub factions of the civilians. And for instance, you have some of them that are running around with a damn AUG, and that's very awkward because the Cirque don't even have the AUG. So it's where the hell did they get that? It's weird things like that. And there's also going to be a civilian M4, and it's going to be single shot, and it's going to have a smaller mag capacity because in the state of California, there's different regulations that kind of prohibit having more than 20 rounds in a magazine, having fully automatic weapons and stuff like that. And so I'm looking into kind of redoing that. So the M4 that the civilians will have, it's going to have a 9mm conversion kit on it. So it's going to have a small magazine because the most common, it's 9x19mm. So that's you're going to see that kind of fickle out, and that's going to change a little bit of the balance. Because right now, as it stands, when you do kind of engage with the civilians, just for me, when I ran, I built maybe 30 spec ops and ran into a group of maybe 8. And tell me why the ratio, I lost 17 men. We're not going to talk about that, but that was the day. I was yeah, this this needs to be a little more realistic because it's just from a balance standpoint. It's going to be interesting, but it's definitely going to be a lot more realistic in terms of most of the civilians are going to have 9mm handguns. And if they do have an assault rifle, it's going to be semi-auto, and it's not going to, there's going to be a difference in power in terms of Cirque versus the sub-factions if you ever conflict with them.
Do you want to talk about, what was it? There was something else that we had hit upon. Well, no, actually, you already hit it. Sorry. Is that basically it was essentially just we wanted to distinguish the civilians, but at the same time, keep in mind that the classes of weapons, the ex-military people, would still have access to higher caliber weapons like you do, being ex-military. So there's still going to be some
nuance. So there's still going to be some that will spawn in with a fully auto, a fully auto M4, but it's gonna be more rare than every single time, because right now they're either going to have an M4 or a not, and then also they're getting their own rocket launcher because right now they don't have one. That was something that we talked about implementing. I just need to get it done, so we're just going to go ahead and get that in there so they actually can fight back. For instance, if you piss them off, you're going to have some RPGs coming your way.
What do you say?
Oh, I was just gonna.
The biggest thing is that some of them are going to have access to their ex-military, so they're going to have access to higher caliber weapons. But then the other aspect is that we would still roll some amount of people that still have access to better weapons like the RPGs because they raided a cache. Because in our lore, from what Chris had devised, after the Liberty Island attack, the U.S. government hid weapon caches around for local responders for anti-terrorist efforts. And the idea is that some of those get stolen by Natalie's group, by other civilians from the police, National Guard, and other forces. So the idea is there will still be some high-caliber weapons that you'll still run into, even on weak people. But the RPGs will be explained away in terms of like, look, it was part of the weapon cache. They got a hands on it. You're bringing out vehicles. GG kind of deal where they'll be able to shoot down your helicopters and shoot down your vehicles. So then that way they're not just you're rolling an Abrams or Stryker, JLTV, and they can't do anything to you anymore. So it's also that level of balance that we're thinking about in terms of like just how everything kind of comes into play there. Did you want to talk? You didn't talk about Chelsea because she's been on the screen for almost 10 minutes.
Oh yes. So Chelsea, she is a huge work in progress. Just kind of getting the finite details, just kind of the complications of getting the facial details in from, I don't know how deep you want to go into it, but like, basically so we have the concept of Chelsea. I don't know if you can pop that up there.
Let's keep talking.
So I was going to use that as visual feedback so I can go over the issue I'm running into. So the issue when it comes to the concept right here, it's very hard for the program to pick up facial details from that. So I'm having to kind of figure out the cheekbone structure. It's not able to figure out where her cheekbone is raised, how it extrudes. So when I try to place it in there, it kind of blows her up. And so I've been kind of working on getting it as close to the concept as I can. So that's kind of holding me back just a little bit. I'm kind of getting in a better place with it now. It just took a lot of trial and error. And then I still have to do the damage phase on her because right now, what I have right now is more so I'm just trying to get her facial shape, approved, and then I'll do the damage pass on it. It's just there's so much back and forth on the detail side. I just want to hold off before I do the damage because then I'll be wasting time if I have to go back and redo it. Keep in mind also an
aspect of it is that nothing ever looks like the concept. It's like the what was it like if you look at Witcher, like they were mad that Cersei didn't look like how she looked in the original game. But if you look at Geralt from the original Witcher trailers that CD Projekt Red announced, their CG model, their concept, everything was vastly different from what actually was in the game. So you figure it's one of those things where like we try and get it as close as possible, but there's always going to be discrepancies, because essentially what Michael's doing is that we're using a program where you can feed in someone's picture. It's the same way that we do the Patreon thing, where like if someone wants to be added in as a civilian, they take a picture of themselves, is that it doesn't work as well a concept. It works better with real people. So theoretically, if we went out on the street and we found someone that looks like Chelsea, and then we paid the user likeness, we'd probably be done in 10, 20 minutes. Because we could take photos of like their front, their left, their right, and their back, feed it into this program. It generates everything, and then he spends maybe 10 minutes cleaning it up if it's a really good high-res picture of like 8K minimum. So it's one of those things where it's like, I think as we scale up and we get access to more things, like after co-op, when we get to the campaign, that might be something that we kind of try and like edit in our workflow. And I think that's why you see a lot of AAA studios having real people instead of like modeling it the old way, is that it's easier and quicker because you can make a likeness of a person nowadays with modern technology in probably an hour versus doing like a detailed face. Sometimes that's like not based off a real person, can take weeks. All the small intricate details.
Yeah, I would say the quickest like character took like an hour, and that was with like real photos. It took like an hour to get it in, and then just had to dress it up. And in terms of the pipeline as well, so after Chelsea's done, I'm going to be moving on to Cassandra, which is the current operator that you can play as right now. I still need to put her in the tactical uniform.
Doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
We don't have a... she's going to be spruced up as well because her face in game has a lot of the concept makeup on it because it was directly pulled from the concept. So I'm going to spruce that up to make her look more realistic because it looks like she's like prettied up. Like she looks like a geisha almost. Oh, yeah. So that she's going to get spruced up a little bit to look a little more realistic. And then I'm going to be moving down to some other operator things. And then as well with that, I was going to look at changing the scientist, sprucing up his outfit. I do have a better scientist outfit. I kind of wanted to see if I could get working on them.
Why don't you go ahead and stay on the record what you plan on doing with the civilians so we can get to the Q&A section. So you want to talk about like what your plans are with the civilians so then they know?
So the civilians, we talked about, what we are going to do. We're going to have basically 6 6 males and 6 females, and they're going to be. It's not going to be the same civilians that are currently in there. Those are getting thrown out. And what's going to happen with those 6? I'm going to have the base level, and then I'm going to have 2 sub variants that are going to be alterations of the base one. And so once it's all said and done, there's going to be over 60 different civilians that can be that's going to be pulled from. So you're not always going to see the same 3 males, same 3 females every single time you see a civilian. And then that's also going down to the sub factions. So like the raiders and like
it's the raiders, it's the normal people, and then it's the militants.
The normal people, the militants. So that's also getting trickled down to them. So in total, you're probably looking at about 84 new civilian subtypes.
Yes,
like just models in general to kind of differentiate and show like it's just more immersion is what we're actually just going for. Just more immersion. And that's what we're working on as soon as I finish Chelsea and
the operator.
Chelsea and the operator thing. I'm going to be jumping onto that. And then we're going to be jumping over to the infected, and the infected are going to get spruced up. So the civilians are going to be passed through. And then once we finish the civilians, we're going to go through and do the same to the infected. So in the infected, I'm going to do the same. It'll be like 64 roughly new infected models, basically, to match the new civilians that are in there. They're just going to be
the infected variation. So he'll design like a base male and female, and then he'll dress them up in like a crap ton of different outfits to get more mileage out of them in the confines of an RTS game. So this person might have the same head, but that one has a different cap and a shirt, and it's in like a skirt. And then another one is in like long pants. And then that way, when you look at it from a top-down perspective, it gets more mileage out of the game.
As well as different body types, so you'll have athletic. You'll get the boomer from Left 4 Dead, basically. It's going to be very fluid in terms of like the types of civilians you're going to see.
In a nutshell, Michael's entire prerogative in this next quarter, going into like February, March, is to basically finish the operator, going into like Monday-ish. Well, you said the operator, and then seeing what you can do about the scientist. So that'd be about a day or two, really. So that's Tuesday, Wednesday. And then by Tuesday, Wednesday, at that point, you're probably also working on Chelsea, and that bleeds into like Thursday-ish because you're back and forth revisions of me and Chris. So by Thursday, Friday, ideally, you're doing the weapon animations. You're doing whatever you want to do with that. And then you would jump into the abyss the following week, depending on how long the weapon animations take to essentially start on the civilians. So you're probably looking at like probably around the 20th. The 13th to the 20th, or sometime around then, I would imagine, is when you would start on the civilian variations, and you would start pumping them out, essentially, right? Something along that line?
Mm-hmm. I think what we talked about, it was around the end of the month, especially because of the things that we talked about internally for civilians. So definitely, I would say the end of the month, you'll start seeing like trickles, because I'm going to basically do it in waves. So I'm going to basically go through and get all the males situated, push those out, and remove the current males out. So it's kind of just going to be a trickle effect. You'll start seeing like towards the end of the month, like the patches that we'll have going out, you'll start seeing like the swaps and the differences in terms of like the density, not the density, but like the fidelity and the difference in the actual civilians in the world.
Yeah.
And that's basically the plan that we're going through right now.
Yep. Okay, so anything else you want to cover? Any questions for Michael? Questions for animation, character modeling, weapons?
None that I can think
He's
of.
the weapon boy.
Do we have any questions?
Balancing,
anything.
And then at that point, we'll move on to the conclusion. We'll open it up for any last questions for 10 minutes. And then we'll wrap it up because we're coming up on the 2-hour mark, I think. Yeah, we're at 1 hour and 31 minutes. So you figure.
Yeah.
I'm just scanning through.
I think Terminal had a question about
see if anyone's got any questions. Are you literally going to give the Civs RPGs?
Yes. She was gonna give them. I think Michael was talking about giving them like a lower tier, like disposable one. Which RPG were we talking about, Michael?
I mean, it's really just RPG 7. I mean, if we did an AT4, it would make more. See, that's a hard one.
From the law,
because we're in the hell with to get the AT4 kind of thing. So it's like more of the confines is. I guess before we go down that rabbit hole, we would kind of probably have to talk with Chris to see what would make sense for them to get their hands on.
Well, I mean, the idea is we have that stash.
Because I'm not saying like RPG, I'm just saying a rocket, propelled grenade. I'm not saying indefinitely it's going to be the RPG 7. I'm just saying that they're going to have.
The thing about an RPG 7,
I mean,
we don't sell that in the United States, as far as I know. So, like, you figure.
Homeland Security is going to be knocking on your door, bro. Right?
Regardless, all of our weapons are just restricted to like only like certain personnel. So at the end of the day, for the confines of making the gameplay fun and balanced, we have to make that concession of like, look, they have AT4s, they have RPG 7s. So, and how you wrap that up is you basically like that's why Chris had that area of for pandemic mode where I was like, look, there's caches, the police had caches, the civilians found caches. And in those caches were modern military weapons. So you figure they're not often you would see them, but ideally you just would pick whatever makes sense. They mass produce in the Americas. It'd probably be an AT4 if I would have guessed. And then you just go that route. We probably just don't make them disposable because the idea is that most of our tanks are going to take several RPG hits. So it'd be really weird if an AI just shoots one and runs away.
You would probably have to kind of go into the gaming mechanic where they just have like 4 on hand. Yeah, like it is what it is.
So there are certain restrictions, changes, alterations, whatever.
It's just more so we'll just have to find a good balance to where it's not like ridiculous in the sense of like they're just shelling rockets at me all day. Like obviously we'll go through and like make sure it's not like overpowered, but there still needs to be a premise of where they can stand to fight against you if you bring in like a squadron of Bradleys.
Kind of counter. So it's one of those things where like we'll get to that point when we get to the civilians, but ideally that's something that we're thinking about in terms of like what we try would fit in. Well, regardless, it has to be done around before doctrines or during doctrines, because otherwise you're just going to roll over all the civilians once you get vehicles. So theoretically, sometime in March, you would have to basically just have the whatever RPG you and Chris decide on in the engine, and then me and Derek would just add it to the rotation, add a cost for it, and then essentially build it into the core of like, okay, the AI understand when to use these objects per se, because they don't need to be running around RPGs on every fire team theoretically. It would just be like a weapon they bring out to reinforce or like to supplement a team when they know they're going against armor or something. So we'll have to figure that out. It might have to be a secondary weapon for utility reasons. So actually, yeah.
And not even that, like they could have their own like handheld grenade launcher that has like armor piercing. But another thing is that you could just
actually would make more sense is doing the engineer route and not having it be a primary, because then they need the utility of being able to fight in normal combat. So you could give the one variation of the models that is always the RPG guy when it comes to the civilian, so you understand that if you see an RPG on the back of that guy, he could switch to that RPG at any time in combat and say he uses submachine guns or smaller caliber weapons, so it makes sense. So it's one of those things where like we just need to basically play with that. Okay, well.
And in terms of vehicle animations, real quick, Dumbrick, vehicle animations I don't necessarily have a play in. That's more Dimitri, because how they work, they just kind of have like a what's the best way to put it? Like they have a clamp and a rotator that kind of moves the turret to look at where they're shooting. Basically, there's no animation involved. Basically, would vehicle animations be covered? Vehicle animations for me would be like the people that are
because you
like,
figure
that you see.
If it's the helicopters, that's not being touched for a good period of time. If it's the ground vehicles, as far as I know, they're fine, unless there's something that I didn't know of that's causing them to act weird. So where is this question?
He was just asking what vehicle animations
right now, there's not something that's obvious that has been brought up to us. The vehicles are going to be left alone as it stands. Because those, they're fine as they are right now, but it's one of those things where like we might come back to them in the future because we're going to tweak their flight model potentially in the future. Let's see. That's everything I got. So unless you guys have any questions, we can Yeah.
Oh, the AK is going away. By the way, the AK
So
is
random.
going away. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay.
The AK is going away.
Winter Durvar, all you two show. So anything else you guys want to bring up before we wrap this up?
I ran out of
Excellent.
I ran out of schedule
Okay,
a while
and
ago.
then Durvar?
We're good.
Yeah. I've run out.
Well, then questions.
I've run out
I
of,
mean, at this point,
questions.
we've concluded the main section. And at this point, we'll take community questions on voice or on text for approximately about 10, 15 minutes. If it dies down, there's no questions. We'll wrap it up at that point and run away. So let's give them some time to write in questions on YouTube, Steam, and Discord. You'll have Michael. Yeah, you have questions for Michael for animation, character modeling. You have questions for Chris for writing and game design, art direction. And then you have questions for Efren for modeling and for level design. Let's see. Eagles asked the question about will there be options to get more ships like destroyers to escort the aircraft carrier or to lock down an island. As it stands right now, the current carrier iteration is kind of like our test bed into figuring out how well it works. It's something we've talked about, but I don't have any information on that yet. Like you figure, like the LCAC and the aircraft carrier need a little bit more finessing before we potentially go into adding more. But I feel like we're gonna leave it where it is for right now. The most we'll do is add a couple more airstrikes to the Circuit Doctrine stuff, and we'll leave it there.
You still need counter ships too.
Because
Anything
I
they add
would
into it.
I
Just
would
add a little
argue
thing to it.
that the best time to do that would be when we have the resources to do the aquatic animals for the infected, and we add in the boats for Pierce and Natalie. Because when we do that, it would make more sense to go more the naval combat aspect of things. Well, we have a game design doc for all the backlog stuff, but it's one of those things where like we have some of those models, like what Terminal is sharing, but we added in there, GG, you win. How does the infected counter you? You know, so it's one of those things where it's like it's going to be an escalation of basically just as the game progresses, as more tech is implemented, you know, as we get more resources, we'll push having more variations of infected that will, you know, tackle the player in different diverse ways. Anyhow, any more questions? Anything on YouTube?
Don't be afraid. We don't bite much. I do not.
So there was
I wouldn't
a question
trust
from Edwin on
the rest of us are
YouTube.
cool.
It was like, have you used things like 3D Coat in
definitely
order to
wouldn't
use
trust
their
that.
algorithms for auto mapping and normal information? 3D. Do you guys know what that is for modelers? 3D Coat? Michael? Efren?
I've never heard of it.
3D Coat?
What did you say?
He's asking, have you used things like 3D Coat in order to use their algorithms for auto mapping and normal information?
Nope. Been using Blender for everything.
I was gonna say it was like I just model it and
So
I just do it manually.
I don't think it's much different from like what we can do with Substance and Blender already. I think it's just another.
It does photogrammetry,
stuff.
volumetric Boolean, array tool, subsurface arrays, normal map to mesh. It's easier to PPP paint.
Yeah, it's just
it
another
supports
3D
Blender. Yeah, it sounds like it's just like Endo or Substance Painter. Or am I wrong?
No, yeah, I mean,
that sounds like it.
Is.
Yeah, it basically tries to do it all the. It's like
done.
a click of a button type of thing. The only thing is, like for me personally, like with my Substance method, I don't even need to do bakes. I rarely do bakes. Basically at this point with how the technology is, like on my side of things using Substance and kind of like my method for modeling, I rarely use bakes.
Right, well, I don't do modeling. I'm a programmer by trade, so you figure I defer to them when it comes to this. I know very rudimentary modeling. I can make a basic block out of an M4 and then cry.
No, we what was it? I think like
Oh,
God, we sound
Lord.
old. Like, I think it was like almost 8 years ago.
Don't remind me.
when you opened Max and I tried to help you make
We tried making it M4
I forget
off
what we
of a
tried
blueprint.
making.
We don't talk about that day. I need to actually sit
Yeah.
down and look at modeling it one time or another for fun. We don't talk about that.
It's the reason I'm using Blender though, because
Maya.
I used to use ZBrush for sculpting.
Yeah.
You could do that in Blender. I was using Marmoset for baking maps or XNormal. You could do that in Blender now. It's just a matter of learning it. I mean, picking up another 3D program is just.
But it's getting better too.
Like I said, just
slowly but
learning
surely.
Another program.
It's getting better. It's just there's a few caveats, like their smoothing group system is kind of garbo, but who knows? They might actually, change that. It's just been the way it is since they started Blender, and I don't know if they have any plans on changing that. But like for me, I'm a Max person. I had too much time in
He's an
Max.
old dog.
I don't know.
Yeah, because like even Dimitri.
I'm an old dog.
Dimitri was
Hard
like,
to teach an old dog new tricks.
If I can't use my Max, and I was like, damn, that's real. Like Max is the only one I know. I know Max.
It's just
I don't know Maya. I can't figure out Maya. Max is simple, easy.
Eventually, I do see us transitioning into Maya for animations, but that's like a later.
When that happens.
Yeah, that's a later thing, and that will probably be like when we are like doing like cutscene things. But like I said, that's
the thing about it, right? The entire engine ecosystem is built around Maya because they have all their scripts and all their integrations are.
All the scripts and the control rigs, the automated rigging that you can do, like there's so much you can do animation wise in Maya. And for whatever reason, Autodesk looks at Max and are like, "You're really good at modeling. We're gonna keep you there."
Yep, I love that program. That's at least I know that program. I can say that at least, as I know enough. Okay, so questions. We got anything on YouTube or a Discord? Because we're gonna be wrapping this up in a couple of minutes, boys and girls. Tamino has a question. For the endgame airstrike abilities, will they be called in via the A10? I was hoping we get a really strong C-13 Galaxy bomb drop like I drew in my image from far above. Let me. Oh, that one. We have the C5 Galaxy actually modeled. That's what's dropping in troops right now. When it comes down to what deploys the airstrikes, that's going to be Dimitri and Chris agreeing on that. So, however they're deployed in real life, it's going to be left up to their discretion of how we implement them.
Yeah. Oh, it's a Hercules does the Moab.
It was the
What was the other one?
Precision airstrike, which I think would be a coastal battery or a Navy ship. And then it was the napalm. I don't know.
I mean, you also have the Poseidon, and then the Seahawk also can carry.
So it's one of those things where you can figure, I'm pretty much leaving it up to my orders to determine based off of our pool of assets how they want to implement them, because they're already very extra when it comes to the attention to detail. So you figure the Thunderbolt is only ever going to be the 2, which is the bombing run, and then the MG run, and then everything else will be based off of whatever makes sense in terms of like what they use in real life. Thank you, Bench Play, for your feedback. I love that. He basically said he's just passing by to say hello to your work. Say hello. The game is really great. Keep it up. Good development and good pandemic. He's from France, so he sends his greetings to the team and everyone on the Discord. Yay! So again, it's one of those things. It's one of those things where when we get to that point, I'll start sharing it next week. We'll have it where essentially it'll just be the abstract videos, and then the deployment methods will be shown, will be modeled and or tweaked in the back end, and then you probably won't see their final implementation method until we get to them after we finish the cleanup, because that is when the programmers come in. Is that we'd have our abstract models for what deploys said weapon, and then we'd have the airstrikes made in their own little area, And then the programmer is going to be the one that comes together and just kind of puts it all together, times it, and does everything. So if there's a delivery vehicle that ends up getting finessed, adjusted, or put in, I'll share that. But you won't see it like actually doing it until we get to the Cirque Doctrine stuff. All right. Any other questions from anyone? Let me just scroll up.
None that I can think of. Anyone got
I don't think
questions in the
so.
chat?
Okay, we'll give it another minute or two, then we will wrap it at that point. Let me check YouTube. Any questions on YouTube, feel free to drop them on the Steam store page, and chat, feel free to, or on Discord. I should know.
We welcome
I wonder if
questions.
I've
Questions are
broken-
fun.
Can anyone raise their hand, or did someone break that? Let me go look. Maybe Discord broke it recently.
I mean, I wouldn't
I
be
hate
surprised if he broke it. Oh no, Tom Bricken put his hand up.
Okay, so people can't put their hand up. They just don't want to. They're afraid
You
of
can
us.
hate me all you want.
Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. When you say, okay, so excuse me. Sergeant Ghost asked the question, with the gas, will there be an environmental effect like the THV chemicals in Dying Light 2? When you're talking about the gas attack, are you talking about like the one that essentially kills them, like the poisonous one? Or are you talking about the napalm, which is kind of a gas, I guess? And then, or are you talking about the which one are you talking about in particular?
I had to guess probably the gas attack.
Oh, I mean, it's going to kill them, and I mean, I haven't actually played Dying Light 2 that far is the problem. We played it. How long?
We did
12 hours,
about 12
and then we
hours.
jumped off the building and killed ourselves because we got bored. Because it was me, Michael, Chris. Who else was there? Was it Duravar?
It was just us.
I wanted to join you. But
Yeah, I don't know what it was. The games
console.
got so repetitive and boring that everyone just wanted to stop playing it after like the 12-hour mark. So I don't know what you're talking about in particular. Let me look it up on YouTube.
I'm wondering if they're talking about the gas that turns enemies into zombies if they breathe it in for too long.
And die. I'm looking it up right now. Oh, here we go. There's a video on it. Damn, GoDaddy ads.
Yeah, apparently that's the one they're talking about. The one where they kind of you kick an enemy into
the gas. Oh, you're talking about the yellow stuff. Okay, I didn't know there was a name to that. Sorry. So ultimately, when it comes down to it, the only time that really it has an effect, like, would be the Pingu virus, and we have an infection conversion animation for that, where they just kind of lose control and freak out. When it comes to like the chemical attack, that's an actual like. I don't remember the actual like virus, the biological weapon that they're using, but that's like a nerve agent. So that's just gonna kill them immediately, if not after a couple of seconds. So that one's just gonna be just them just dying or ragdolling, and then some kind of particle effect is showing that it's spreading. Because with Niagara, we can make really good, convincing gas. So right now, what Dimitri is basically doing for me as well is he's making the crow movement gas dispersion VFX. And in a way, we're using that to kind of prototype like the gas dispersion for like the gas attack and like those improved effects. So that way, when those crows canisters like explode in the alternative start mode, you get like a cool little like, okay, like it actually is spreading and it goes over certain areas. So he's working on those VFX right now. Beyond that, though, that's all we have planned at this time. But things can change. We could put it in and be like, okay, Michael, can you make some more variations of animations and whatnot? So again, like everything's very fluid when it comes to like once we get the first pass of implementation, and we'll tweak as needed to get the right amount of immersion and whatnot. And some things like I know that Winter has been a big proponent for this. Is like, hey, like when are you gonna add squad chatter and dialogue? And I can do some lines. I remember that, Winter. So it's one of those things where I was like,
That's my big thing.
I'm saving some of these things for when we have the budget to just go above and beyond for like atmosphere, environmental storytelling of small little nuances here and there, and just kind of putting the last like pieces of the puzzle together. Because those aren't like absolute critical, but I feel like they're needed. Kind of like doing a revamp to the sound design, where it's like in the future when everything's finalized and situated, my audio engineer Jacob will come in and he'll use meta sounds to essentially try and make it sound more immersive and more realistic, as close as we possibly can get without having WYs, and looking at games like Battlefield or Call of Duty to figure out sound fields. So that way when you're playing as the operator or when you're playing an RTS, things sound more immersive, and there's different like layers of sounds based off of where you are from the sound, and it can alter and change based off of the world and what's going on. So it's one of those things where it's like some of these things are really great ideas, but I'm earmarking them for when we get to like polish, like right before we're like about to release out of early access kind of stuff, and the campaign is done or about to be done. Question for Chris. So Dumb Brick asked the question, lower question. When someone turns into a zombie, do they still have some sort of consciousness? Like the Last of Us zombies, they are aware of what they are doing, but can't control anything. What do you say to that?
No, only Chelsea. Okay. Everybody else is like a hive mind to her, and she's still like fighting her true self with.
That's why we have that dialogue where if you hover over her or hover over the fog of war, where she is, you'll hear her talking to herself, and she basically is just kind of having a mental break in terms of like coming to the realization of like what has she done in terms of like all of the shit she's done up to this moment. Because I mean, there's a lot that's implied, there's a lot that's explained in the books and X, Y, and Z. I mean, she's killed at this point thousands of people, and then you figure the trauma of what she did to her parents. So it's one of those things where like she's losing her mind, and then she's becoming a different person almost.
I think the worst part is when you're playing as the operator and you're just walking down the city, all of a sudden you hear behind you, and it's just like, hello, hi, I'm.
Well, I mean, she doesn't say that, but I know what you mean. She more so is like just kind of like small little jabs or dialogue here and there of like. I mean, it's a mentally unstable person, so the sentences aren't that cohesive, that like understandable, but it's enough for you to understand and start to put together a picture of her state of mind, and then it's starting to deteriorate based off of the person she was now and where she's going.
I think the funniest part for me, right, is that I like to have a little saying about Chelsea, is when she appears like that and you hear her coming, I don't need to run fast. I just need to run faster than everyone else around me.
Here. Demand me never to play a co-op game with this asshole. Jesus Christ.
Like, I would feed you to Chelsea faster than you could say what's happening.
Okay, questions. Let's see. Terminal had one question. Regarding the props idea thread I had, one specific thing is that I wanted to get feedback on was the new Cirque vehicle yard idea, because I really, hot take, don't like the look of the current one. I'd rather have a U.S. Army themed one. How many dev resources would it take to model swap the current vehicle production site for a U.S. Army themed one as some kind of DLC or something? I know it's a low priority, LOL. Maybe there could be a button to pick what kind of variant of a building you want to place, like a hazmat theme, garrison tent, or keep the Army one, etc. So that's a really good idea. Probably a week. But you figure that's a week that he's away from it. But that's a week that he's away working off of nothing else but that. So it's one of those things where it's like.
And
so again, this is something Chris and I have talked about. Is that you figure there are a couple of Cirque structures that they're passable, but we want to change them over time. The motor pool is one. The helipad's another. It's too damn big. And then the motor pool needs to be made less like cartoony. Like what you're saying, terminal. So We already have that in the pipeline. It's just a low priority because the motor pool was originally intended to be a helipad and ground vehicle thing, but then we separated it because we added so many vehicles and vehicles to the game that it was just too much to have it all in one. And we wanted to kind of have our little diversification there. But you have the barracks for the ground infantry, you have the motor pool for the ground vehicles, and then you have the helipad for the air units. So realistically, the helipad needs to be shrunk by half to 3/4. The motor pool needs to be redesigned to be more of like a modern camo workshop HQ thing that's just inclined to be just for vehicles. So it's one of those things where it's on my backlist. When Dimitri runs out of shit to do, or maybe before he goes back and works on San Francisco North, I might have him R&D some stuff, but it kind of depends on the timeline, because you figure if Epic takes longer than I expect to fix it before going into February and March, and there's nothing else for him to do, because the idea is that Efren starts the new main menu map. So if we have the delays of New Year's again next week, where he's roughly starting it Monday, Tuesday, if I were to guess, once he gets approval for the models, for the smoke grenade and all that stuff. So he finishes that. He starts it. He'll show it next Saturday. We'll show it the next Saturday in terms of where it is. That's about 2 to 3 weeks of just the main menu. And then at that point, at the end of the month, the plan was for Efren and Dimitri was to go work on San Francisco North. If the engine is not in the state that we need it to be from Epic's standpoint of fixing the critical bugs that they introduced in 5.5, then they would go off and work on auxiliary items, potentially polishing up the horde maps, and or doing stuff like what you're suggesting. It just kind of comes down to, at the end of the month, we'll sit down, we make a list, and then we present that list as well, so you guys know what's going on for transparency's sake going into February, and then we'll execute. So it's one of those things where it's it's very fluid. It's one of those things where we're completely situational. Things are changing almost every 2 weeks, and we're going to just roll with the punches from what Epic kind of puts down. Because I've been reading their GitHub, and they haven't acknowledged the bug. There's other people having the bug, and I put a bug report in, and they haven't approved the bug report. So it's kind of in this weird state of limbo where I'm like, hey, can you guys fix this? Acknowledge me, senpai. So it's one of those things where once they get back to us, the other devs that are having the issue in 5.5, then we'll go towards that tangible thing of San Francisco North. But then since that's not a thing, then I'll redirect the assets, and basically have them work on what you're suggesting, Terminal, or have them polish up or do the old structures based off of whatever is available, and we'll come up with a schedule. Anyhow, any other questions? Because we're definitely. Oh, it's already 7:00. Yeah, one question and we're done. Winter and Durvar, pick one question and then we're done. Hardest one of the night. Pick one question.
Pick one question.
Pick one.
We've
Okay,
gone through so many.
One question. So anyone, hit me with a hard question so we can everyone can run away. Any questions from anyone else before we run away? No one has their hand raised. Nothing from the YouTubes. Nothing.
Would you rather you put in bacon, but no games?
Yeah, it's 7 p.m. for me. It's 4 for Chris. It's all over the place.
Yeah, let's finish it.
All right. Well, then I am going to. Yeah. Okay. There's no questions. Who wants to give the outro? I'll do it. So again, thank you guys so much for coming. We appreciate you guys coming in. We're going to be here again every Saturday for this cleanup period to keep the transparency so you guys can see what's going on. What have we changed? We're going to run into issues. So that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to game design or anything related to programming. But we'll keep you guys informed of the process on a weekly basis. These are kind of a way of supplementing the blog posts I do on Steam and the ones I do on Discord. I will be doing a blog post on Steam before next. Well, technically I did one yesterday. So what I do is I kind of fit the blog post into the podcast thing for each Friday. So again, if you can't make it, you can watch the VOD. Well, if you missed something, it's on YouTube. If you want to support development, you're welcome to pick up, maybe buy the book on Steam or on Amazon. Check out one of the support packs on Steam. Support us on Patreon if you'd like. Anything helps. and we appreciate all the love and support and the patience you guys have given us. And yeah, we're gonna come out as a lot stronger than we went in terms of basically just using this cleanup period. Anything else you guys want to add before we end there?
No, that's beautiful.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, then everyone have a good